His images have been celebrated, vandalized, and even discussed in Congress. Andres Serrano's art tackled sex, death, and above all, America, its idiosyncrasies and its divisions, those born of politics, religion, class, and ethnicity. An exhibition of his work called Portraits of America has just opened at the Musée Maillol here in Paris, and he's with us in the studio to tell us more. Andres, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, the theme of this show is your home country, of course. It's visual representations. They've always fascinated you. And we see the ultimate symbol of America, I suppose, the stars and stripes, in many different formats in this show, sometimes bloodied, sometimes torn. Is that how you see America? What state's it in?
America is in a troubled state right now, but I think it's always been complicated. Growing up, I was taught to believe America was the greatest country in the world and also the policeman of the world. And it's something that we all have been taught, and some of us still believe it. But as you get older and as times change, you realize that sometimes the emperor has no clothes.
Well, one portrait that you can't miss in this exhibition is that of former President Donald Trump. This is a picture you made long before he was president, in 2004. And I wonder why you found him so interesting as a subject. Did you have an inkling of how crucial he was going to become?
Well, he was important to me for that work. That was part of America. His portrait was part of America, a series that I started in 2001, right after September 11th. And there were more than 100 people represented in my America. And Donald Trump was one of the people that I wanted for my exhibition because, to me, he represented the American dream. And I think he did represent that dream to many people. He was well known to Americans, perhaps not in the best way. Sometimes he was known as a braggart. He was known as an a-hole. But he was known. And so I felt like I needed Donald Trump for my exhibition. And although he represented the American dream for me at that point, some could say that now Donald Trump represents the American nightmare.
Well, I suppose part of that dream was becoming president, and indeed he's running again for president. But some years later, while he was in office, you made a collection of items that became the exhibition and the book called The Game, All Things Trump. This is some weird and wonderful memorabilia, either merchandise with his image or with some link to him. How did you find these things, and what was the strangest item you came across?
Well, I sourced all of these things on eBay, most of them. And I felt like, in addition to the portrait that I made of Donald Trump in 2004, now I wanted to do a more, different kind of portrait, meaning an installation which consists of over 1,000 objects that were created for Donald Trump, for his empire, his brand, his hotels, his casinos, his everything. Donald Trump, if you look at The Game, you will see that throughout the decades, Donald Trump has put his name on almost everything from Coca-Cola to vodka to Trump University. So Donald Trump has been very good at promoting himself onto companies and later to the American people. A month ago, 2 months ago, Trump came out with a sneaker, and so I felt like I need Trump's gold sneaker now for The Game. And even though I couldn't buy one, I was able to get one. He would only loan it to me because it's signed by Donald Trump. And he said, you have to insure it for $100,000. So that was the last thing I added to The Game, Donald Trump's gold sneakers.
It's true that he's become a bit of a brand. And speaking of Trump supporters, that's a world that you've explored through another medium, cinema. Your film Insurrection revisits that fateful day, January 6th, 2021, when a crowd of rioters stormed the US Capitol in an effort to block the new administration taking over after the election in 2020. Let's take a look at a clip.
Apologies for freedom. I can't handle this. When freedom rings, answer the call. On your feet, stand up tall. Freedom's on our shoulders. USA! Enemies of freedom every time.
So in that film, you collage news clips, smartphone footage of those riots, historical archive. A screening of it was actually cancelled in London because the cinema considered it to be too pro-Trump. What did you make of that?
I thought it was strange, but it's not unusual for people to misunderstand my work. A lot of times people say, what's the message in your work? I'm not a messenger. I'm an observer. And what I do is I create and then I present it to you and I leave it up to you to determine how you see it. In terms of the game, in terms of the insurrection, I feel Donald Trump would love the game. He would love insurrection because it's all about him and he's proud of what these people did. If you hate Trump, of course, you're going to hate those things. But so my work is oftentimes interpreted depending on who the person is.
Now, speaking of protests, your hometown, New York, has been filled with protesters in recent days and weeks. University students calling for a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas. Columbia University, in fact, brought in the police, cancelled class. Could that be seen as an attack on freedom of expression, do you think?
It could be, but I see it a different way. I see it as something that also happened during the 60s and 70s during the Vietnam War. I was, young, very young during the war, but I saw the protests, and I saw that the protests became so big that eventually they had to end the war. And so this is only the beginning of what's happening, because I see a recurrence, and it's happened before, and it will continue to happen. Also, the Civil War, as we can see by this recent movie called The Civil War, it was never resolved. There are some people who still hate the North and the South, and that's why they have the blue states and the red states. So the country is, in name united, but otherwise it's not.
And speaking of some of those divisions, I wanted to bring up another series of photographs that you made in Famous. You went to eBay and bought objects, memorabilia, items for your installations and your images. There are some very politically incorrect, very disturbing images there. An example is Black Dolls, Larry. That's one I found quite striking. These sort of symbols bring up some very emotional responses from people sometimes. What do you want people to take away from your representations?
Yeah, these things are politically incorrect because they're racist. But the thing about history is if you pretend it never happened, it keeps on happening. Of course, black people are not going to be victimized now, but we find new scapegoats. America has a funny way of finding new scapegoats to come down on, to criticize, to ridicule, and to try to make the bad guy. You always need a bad guy. And so America is kind of, sometimes, I hate to say, but we're a bully. We pick on certain people, and other people, we can't pick on them.
Indeed. Now, I mentioned that your work has been discussed in Congress. That was back in the late 80s when a Republican lawmaker expressed concerns about artists who are making what he recalled a despicable display of vulgarity with public money. The photograph he was referring to was your 1987 Piss Christ. Now, that image has become infamous. It's been vandalized 3 times, including here in France, in Avignon. We know religion's always a sensitive issue, but how do you see it right now in America's landscape as the country faces a presidential election next year?
Well, Piss Christ is not an issue at this time. I mean, that doesn't mean it can't come back. Usually, Piss Christ creates commotion when there's a right-wing group trying to stir the pot. And there are still Christians in America who, especially right-wing Christians, who think they know what Christianity is better than others. But last year, I was invited, along with 200 people, to the Vatican to hear the Pope speak at the Sistine Chapel on the inauguration of the 50th anniversary of the Contemporary Art Collection. And, at the time, everyone was able to get to see the Pope for a few seconds. And when I saw the Pope, I said to him in Spanish, because he's from Argentina, so I said to him, Your Holiness, my name is Serrano, and I come here to ask for your blessing. And He looked at me, he took my hand, he smiled, he tapped it twice, and then he gave me a thumbs up. So I feel I don't care what these Christians say. The Pope blessed me, and that's all that matters.
Okay. Well, finally, we asked you for a cultural tip, and you pointed us in the direction of one of the great painters of the Dutch Golden Age, Frans Hals. There's an exhibition of his work at the moment at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. What is so special for you about his painting?
Well, seeing the pictures in person, because I was there and I saw it, it occurred to me that, I read something about that Frans Hals was probably drunk. He liked drinking, and he was drunk, and that's why the people are having a good time. I don't see it that way. I see Frans Hals as a humanist who's capturing real people. And so that's what I like about it, that his people project character, personality, and it's like my work. I feel like even though I sometimes portray people as representing something more than themselves, they also represent themselves. And in my work, and what I try to do is to make everyone look good, no matter who they are.
A universal humanity of portraiture. Thank you so much for joining us today, Andres.
Thank you.
Well, we'll leave you with a taste of some of Frans Hals' masterful portraits. Do check in with us here on France 24 for more arts and culture. There's more news coming up just after this.